Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in today's video we're gonna finish implementing the enemy AI. We're gonna give it some kind of HP. Also we can hit it using the F key. And when the health is less than 0, we have this death animation. So if you didn't watch my previous video, go ahead and check it out, because we're gonna continue adding some logic to this enemy. And let's jump right into it. So here's what we left off from the previous video. We've added this zombie character and it is controlled using this animator controller. As you can see, we have the different states or animations. By default, our enemy is idle, and if we go close to him, he transitions from the idle state to the chase state and so on. So make sure to watch my previous video in which we have covered the state machine behavior and how to use it. But we can't kill the enemy. We need to give it some kind of HP or health. And to do that, we can add a new variable under the zombie script. We can open it up. So under this script, we're going to create a new variable, and it's going to be the health of the enemy using public int, and let's call it enemy HP. I'm going to give it the default value 100. Then we can create a function that we are going to call whenever we hit the enemy. So let's go all the way down and use public so that we can access it from other scripts. Void. I'm going to call it take damage. Also, I want to pass in the damage amount using int damage amount. So each time we hit the enemy, we're gonna reduce the enemy HP using minus equals the damage amount. Then we're gonna check if the enemy HP is greater than 0. In such case, we're gonna play the get hit animation. Otherwise, we're gonna play the death animation. And to do that, we can use the if statement. So if the enemy HP is greater than 0, then we're gonna play some kind of hit animation. But otherwise, we're gonna play the death animation. But we haven't created these animations yet. Let's go back into Unity. And let's start by creating the get hit animation. So if you don't know, we are using the game R2D. And recently we've downloaded these sprites for our enemy. We have the death sprites. We can select all of these and drag them under the hierarchy, and that creates the animation by default. I'm gonna put it under the zombie folder, and let's call it death animation or simply death. Also, we will have this object. We need to get rid of it. We only need the animation that is under the zombie folder, and it's this one. We could also check it out by dragging the zombie character. And let's hit play. So this is our death animation. But the only problem is that we didn't have a get hit animation. Let's go under this folder. Basically, I'm gonna use the first two attack animations. And this is gonna be the get hit animation. Let's select these three, drag them under the hierarchy, and create the animation. Let's call it damage. The same thing, we need to delete this object and the animator controller as well. But to use these animations, we need to open up the animator controller. Here we have all of the animations like idle, chase, attack, and so on. So let's drag the damage one and the death animation. Basically, our enemy can transition from all of these states to the death or the damage states. That's why I'm gonna make a transition from any state to the damage state using right click, make transition to the damage state. And the same thing, we can play the death animation whenever our enemy is idle, chasing, or attacking using make transition from any state to the death state. Then to control these transitions, we need to add parameters. Under the parameters tab, we have this plus icon. Basically, I'm gonna use a trigger. Let's call the first one damage. And whenever we set this trigger, our enemy will transition from any state to the damage state. And to set that, you need to select the transition. Then from the right side, we can add this condition, which is the damage trigger. Then we have few settings. We need to change few of these, like the transition duration. We need to set it to 0 if you are working on a 2D game. And the same thing, to control this transition, let's add a new trigger. I'm gonna call it death. And don't forget to set the transition duration to 0. Then under conditions, let's use the death trigger. Now we could control these parameters through this script. So let's open it up. And to do that, we need to add a reference to the animator component. So let's add a new variable, public animator, and let's call it animator as well. Then we can set the triggers to play the animations. For example, under here, we're gonna play the damage animation using animator dot set trigger, and this function takes the name of the trigger, which is damage. Make sure to spell it right. And to play the death animation, we can use animator dot set trigger, and the trigger is called death. Now let's save the script, but we didn't call this function yet. So whenever we hit our enemy, we can call this function, and to do that, we can open up the bullet script. So recently we've added the 2D shooting ability, and we've created a bullet script that is under the player. Make sure to check out the video. I'm gonna add a link to it under the video description. Under this bullet script, we are checking if the bullet passes through an object using the onTriggerEnter2D. So we could use this function to check if it's the zombie using if collision dot tag. So if the object that we hit has the zombie tag that we're gonna assign to the zombie character, in such case, we can call the take damage function using collision dot get component, and we want to get the zombie component or the zombie script. And under this script, we have the take damage function. We can call it, but this function takes a damage amount. For example, we can reduce the health by 25 each time we hit the enemy. Let's save the script and test it. But before that, make sure to reference the animator component. So under the zombie script, we need to reference the animator, which is this one. Then let's hit play. But if I hit the F key, you see that the animations is not working, and that's because we didn't add a collider to this zombie. So if you go to the scene view, you see that we didn't add any kind of collider, and the onTriggerEnter2D function will not work if the object doesn't have the collider component. And to fix that, we can add this component using add component, and let's use the capture collider 2D. You could also adjust it using this icon. We have these green edges, and I think we didn't assign the zombie tag to this zombie. So under this tag property, let's go ahead and create a new one, and let's call it zombie. Then let's hit save, and we need to assign it to our zombie character. And let's hit play again. And there you go, now we can hit our enemy. And we can kill it as well. But as you can see, the animation is looping. So we need to make sure that the death animation is not set to loop. And to do that, we can go back to the animation. Let's select it. And let's uncheck the loop time. We need to play this animation once. And for the damage animation, let's uncheck that as well. Also, we need to go back to the idle state. So whenever the zombie takes damage, we need to transition to the idle state again. So let's make a transition to the idle state. And here you don't need to set a condition. Also, we need to change some settings like the exit time. Make sure it's set to 1 to play the whole animation, and the transition duration to 0. So whenever you set the transition to has exit time, once the animation is finished, our enemy will transition to the idle state, and that's what we want. And let's try it again. Now we can hit our enemy. And we can kill it as well. But we still have few problems to fix. For example, we can kill it again. We need to make sure that whenever the enemy is dead, we don't need to check if it's dead again. Also, we need to remove the collider, or we can ignore the colliders. So first things first, let's go back to the C# script, the zombie one, and under here, whenever he's dead, we can disable the collider component using get component capsule collider dot enabled equals false, and we need to disable the zombie script once the zombie is dead, and that's very easy. We can use this. So this means this script dot enabled equals false. And finally, we can ignore the collision between the player and the enemy using a built-in function. So under the start function, we can use physics2d dot ignore collision. So this takes two colliders. We need to give it the player collider and the enemy collider. And luckily, we've created this target variable, which is our player, using find object with tag player. We can use it to get the collider component using target dot get component, and we can get the collider using collider2d. The same thing for the enemy. We can access the collider using get component because this script is attached to the enemy, and we could pass in the collider2d component. And I think that's pretty much it. Let's save the script again and go back into Unity. And there you go. Now we can hit our enemy, and also we can chase, and we can kill it as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any question or comment, make sure to write it under the comment section down below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the bell icon. I appreciate that. And I will see you in the next one. So I hope you're still here because I forgot to add the health bar. And to do that, we can create a slider and update its value using the enemy HP variable. But we need to put this health bar on top of the player. And to do that, we can create a canvas and we can change its type so that we can move it in our scene as any kind of object. And to do that, we can right click UI and let's use a canvas. Then we can go under the inspector and change the render mode to world space. If you do that, we can position our canvas. For example, we can put it on top of the enemy. And to do that, I'm gonna drag it under the zombie character. And let's reset the position by changing the X pose and the Y pose to 0. Then let's create a slider using right click, UI, slider. But you notice it's a little bit big. We can change the scale of the canvas. For example, 0.03 by 0.03. Then let's double click on it. And let's move our slider a bit by changing the Y position. I think 100 is okay. Also, we can change some settings like the height and the width. And I think it looks fine. Let's go ahead and change some settings. For example, we don't want to interact with this slider. We can uncheck interactable and change the transition to none. And here I'm going to change the maximum value to 100, and that's because the enemy HP is between 0 and 100. And I'm going to remove the handle. Now we're going to change the value of the slider, or let's rename it to health bar. Basically, we can access this value property to change the value of the slider. Also, I want to change the colors a bit, like the background color. let's change it to a red color, and the fill color to green color. Then let's go back to the script, and we need to add a reference to the slider. But first, we need to add the namespace Unity Engine .ui so that we can use a slider variable using public slider, that's the type, and let's call it enemy health bar. We're gonna reference that from the inspector. Then we can update its value under the start function using enemy health bar dot value equals the enemy HP, and also whenever we hit the enemy we need to update it. Under the take damage function, let's use enemy health bar dot value equals the new enemy HP, and that's all. Let's save our script. Then we need to reference our health bar by dragging the health bar slider, and let's hit play. And there you go, we finished the enemy logic. We can hit it, and also he can chase, and we can kill it as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any question or comment, make sure to put it under the comment section down below, and I will see you in the next one.